Pete Buttigieg speaks during a Democratic National Committee forum in Baltimore. Reuters, Joshua Roberts. Who is Pete Buttigieg? Current job, Mayor of South Bend, Indiana. Running for President of the United States as a Democratic candidate. Age, 37. Family, Buttigieg is married to junior high school teacher Chasen Glesman. Buttigieg, hometown, South Bend, Indiana. Political party, Democratic. Previous jobs, consultant for McKinsey. Afghanistan. Who is Buttigieg's direct competition for the nomination? Based on a recurring series of national surveys we conduct, we can figure out who the other candidates competing in Pete Buttigieg's lane are, and who the broader opponents are within the party. Buttigieg had a great spring. He went from rock-bottom name recognition among likely Democratic primary voters to the low 30s. Joe Biden, the current frontrunner, is also popular among those who'd be satisfied with Buttigieg, but that's more about Biden's popularity than Buttigieg's constituency. Business Insider. Those satisfied with Buttigieg as nominee tended to be satisfied with lots of different candidates, if a little cool on sen. Bernie Sanders. More than 60% of those satisfied with the South Bend mayor also would be satisfied with Senator Kamala Harris. Most significantly, 3 in 5 of Buttigieg backers would also be satisfied with Elizabeth Warren, a double-digit percentage point bump above her performance among general Democrats. Insider has been conducting a recurring poll through SurveyMonkey audience on a national sample to find out how different candidates' constituencies overlap. We ask people whether they are familiar with a candidate, whether they would be satisfied or unsatisfied with that candidate as nominee, and sometimes we also ask whether they think that person would win or lose in a general election against President Donald Trump. Read more about how we're polling this here. What are Pete Buttigieg's policy positions? On healthcare, supports moving to a single-payer healthcare system in the long run, but has proposed implementing a public option on the Obamacare marketplace first. He calls this Medicare for all who want it. He doesn't believe a Medicare for all system would require eliminating private insurance on immigration, supports the Obama administration's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals (DACA) program, which protects young people who come to the U.S. illegally as children, and wants a pathway to citizenship for young undocumented immigrants. Opposed to Trump's border wall, but supports increasing border security, which could include fencing. On climate change, supports the Green New Deal resolution, which aims to transition the U.S. to 100% clean and renewable energy in 10 years, and stimulate the economy with millions of new jobs, and an expanded social safety net. Wants the U.S. to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord, and was one of more than 400 American mayors to sign a pact to continue adhering to the international pact, after Trump pulled the U.S. out of it in 2017. Calls climate change a national security threat. On campaign finance, doesn't take donations from corporate political action committees and has pledged not to take money from the fossil fuel industry. But he is being supported in part by big-dollar fundraisers. On abortion, supports the right to an abortion, but has not said whether or not he believes a ban on abortion after 20 weeks is constitutional. Supports repealing the Hyde Amendment, which prohibits federal funding for abortion services in most instances. On LGBTQ rights, supports the Federal Equality Act, which would extend non-discrimination protections to LGBTQ people. He supports transgender individuals' rights, including the right for prisoners to receive gender reassignment surgery. On education, supports increasing funding for historically black colleges and universities and minority-serving institutions by $25 billion, supports debt-free public college for students from lower-income families and tuition-free public college for middle-income students. On guns, supports universal background checks, banning military-style assault weapons, a national gun licensing system, stricter red flag laws. On criminal justice reform, in July 2019, released a plan calling for broad policing reform, including new restrictions on the use of deadly force, and pushing states to publish more information on police conduct, supports eliminating incarceration for drug possession, mandatory minimum sentencing, and private prisons, supports abolishing the death penalty, legalizing marijuana, and ban the box, prohibiting employers from asking about a job applicant's criminal record until later in the process, on trade, critical of the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, which he believes has moved jobs in the Midwest overseas, on foreign policy, in favor of withdrawing U.S. troops from Afghanistan. He's opposed to an open-ended commitment in Syria, but supports maintaining a very limited counterintelligence and special operations presence there, supports repealing and replacing the 2001 congressional authorization for the use of military force, in favor of recommitting to the Obama administration's Iran nuclear deal and the Paris Climate Accord, in favor of cutting U.S. aid to Israel if it expands its territory into the West Bank, on taxes, suggested he's in favor implementing some sort of wealth tax and expanding the Earned Income Tax Credit, on democracy reform, supports eliminating the Electoral College and relying on the popular vote to determine the outcome of presidential elections. He supports statehood and full political representation for Washington, D.C., supports expanding the Supreme Court to 15 justices, proposed a new call to service, which would create 1 million paid national service jobs for high school graduates. During the second round of primary debates in July, Buttigieg suggested it would not be as difficult as many think to make significant constitutional reforms like abolishing the Electoral College and make structural reforms to the Supreme Court like tacking on more justices. This is a country that once changed its constitution so you couldn't drink and changed it back because we changed our minds, and you're telling me we can't reform our democracy in our time, he said. We have to, or we will be having the same argument 20 years from now. On social safety net, says the country should have a conversation about universal basic income, supports raising the minimum wage to $15. What are Pete Buttigieg's policy successes? Buttigieg implemented smart streets in South Bend, which involved converting one-way streets to two-way, adding bike lanes, and building new sidewalks in an effort to revitalize the city's downtown. Oversaw a $50 million investment in South Bend's parks and riverfront. How much money has Pete Buttigieg raised? Buttigieg's campaign reported that it raised about $600,000 from 22,000 donors in just over 24 hours following the candidate's March CNN town hall. Buttigieg announced in mid-March that he reached the 65,000 donor threshold to participate in the first Democratic primary debate. Buttigieg's campaign raised over $7 million from nearly 160,000 donors in the first quarter of 2019, and $24.8 million from 294,000 donors in the second quarter, more than any other 2020 candidate. How is Pete Buttigieg viewed by voters compared to the competition? Insider has conducted a number of other polls to check in on how these candidates are perceived in comparison to one another. When we asked respondents to one poll to rank how far to the left or to the right they considered the candidates, Buttigieg was generally considered to be one of the most centrist candidates in the field. Given his lack of national platform, it's unsurprising to see he was viewed as among the least experienced candidates in the field by far. When we asked respondents to rank the candidates based on how prepared they are for the rigors of the presidency given what they knew about their history of public service and experience with government. However, when asked how likable or personable respondents perceived the candidates to be, Buttigieg came in second place behind only Joe Biden. Could Pete Buttigieg beat President Trump? Referring back to Insider's recurring poll, Buttigieg overall is a more obscure candidate than many of his peers, and those who do know of him are unsure if he'd beat Trump. Lucky for Pete, he's on par with other Democrats when it comes to the perception of electability, which is really something for the mayor of a small Midwestern college town. How do Democratic voters feel about Pete Buttigieg's qualifications? Insider has conducted polling about how voters feel about candidate attributes or qualifications. We asked respondents about a list of possible qualifications and if they made them more likely or less likely to vote for a candidate for president. For example, among respondents who said they'd vote in the Democratic primary, 19% said a candidate being a college professor made them likelier to support them, while 4% said it made them less likely to, for a 15% net favorability. We can then see how different candidates' resumes stack up compared to those preferences. Attributes perceived as most valuable include his released tax returns, 43%, him being multilingual, 25%, age 50 or younger, 23%, a child of immigrants, 21%, armed forces veteran, 17%, mayor, 15%, Rhodes Scholar, 12%, and has Ivy League education, 7%. Attributes considered to be a liability based on the preferences of self-reported Democratic voters include his past as a management consultant, -18%, that he has spent little time in government, -22%, and that he grew up wealthy, -42%. Read more of our best stories on Pete Buttigieg. Let's block ads. Why?